the COVID situation in the country is better now than perhaps it has been in the last year and a half plus. The number of the positivity rate, the number of cases all going down. Obviously vaccinations also rising, but perhaps not fast enough. That's a larger issue. But what are some of the signs that we are seeing, some of the signals we are seeing as far as tourism in India is concerned? We are joined now by Rajesh Magow, the Group CEO and co-founder of MakeMyTrip. Mr. Magow, thanks very much for being with us. Great to have you on the program. So tell us what's been happening in the last... we'll focus on aviation a little later, but let's focus on tourism. Are you seeing a recovery in tourism, by which I mean leisure travel? And if so, could you share some numbers with us?
No, absolutely. And thanks for having me, Vishnu. Yes, most definitely, Vishnu, we are seeing very encouraging signs, specifically on leisure segment recovery, if you will. And if I may call it, it's actually a revenge sort of travel. I mean, and some time back we had seen some revenge shopping happening post wave 1 as well. And we saw this post wave 1 as well, specifically to leisure segment, and we can come to the other segments in a bit. But clearly the consumer sentiment, and I would have thought that it's because that people have just been generally locked, inside the room. We're really fatigued and trying to get away. In fact, one of the very interesting sort of anecdote that we got from quote that we saw from the consumer sentiment, where people seem to be now thinking that, I must get out and travel before, God forbid, the third wave comes back. So definitely we see a lot of the travel that is happening, especially nearby destinations, going up to the hills. We saw massive numbers, in mainstream destinations. We are seeing very encouraging numbers growing in the offbeat destinations. We are seeing people just going into alternative accommodations hugely, and so on. And we look at some of the flight numbers, since you spoke about some numbers. So I'll give you some sort of sense on that. Overall recovery, if you would see, Vishnu, on the domestic flights, which is like a, sort of a good indicator or lead indicator for the overall recovery for tourism, we are well into the 60s. And now from a recovery standpoint as compared to the pre-pandemic level. And that the overall flight capacity is capped at 72.5% in any case. So, the industry might be about, because of the load factors being relatively lower, will be, late 50s. On our platform, we see into the mid 60s recovery in any case. And within that, if I may specifically point out the leisure sectors, so the Srinagars, the hills, the Goa off late, Dehradun, Chandigarh, all these leisure sort of routes are recovering much, much higher. Like all recoveries for Srinagar, for example, on our platform, the recovery is more than 100%.
Wow.
And in the couple of other sort of leisure routes, we would see 75, 80, 90% sort of recovery. While on the business travel, like Delhi, Bombay, Bombay, Delhi, Delhi, Bangalore, Bangalore, Delhi, Kolkata, Delhi, Delhi, Kolkata, etc., would be in the 40s. So clearly leisure segment is sort of driving the wave of this recovery right now.
All right. And, when you were talking about mid 60s in terms of the recovery, just so that I understand it, a 60% recovery from the worst period. Is that what you're saying?
From the pre-pandemic. So I'm comparing all these numbers. So yes, these are the run rate numbers compared to the pre-pandemic, which is called it January 20 or February 20 numbers.
Okay. And is there a worry that if there's a third wave, then as you put it, revenge tourism, and I must say I'm guilty of that as well, revenge tourism is going to fade away, and then that would be nightmarish, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so I'll tell you a very interesting thing that we saw, Vishnu, compared to what the recovery we saw, the pattern and the trend post wave 1 and then post wave 2. And clearly what it tells us is, and this is all data, that the people are little bit more careful. So, post wave 1, maybe we ended up sort of dropping or lowering the guard, fast enough, and maybe, sort of caused the second wave, the intensity of second wave, etc. as well. And the recovery pace that I see, looking at the data, it took us 4 quarters to get to some sort of same sort of size and scale in terms of recovery. And now it seems like it'll take only 2 quarters to get to that number. So I think the other variable I think we should keep in mind, and I think you were pointing it out in your earlier section as well, that although things could be better on vaccination trend or the run rate or the momentum, but we've in the last at least month and a half we've picked up a serious sort of momentum there as well. On an average, if there is 7.5 million a day, it used to be 3.5, 4 million a day, and and if you look at the urban population, a lot of the urban population is getting covered for the double dose as well. So I think that is going to make the difference from, I do think all things considered, looking at the world trend and all, the third wave might be inevitable, but the intensity, the real hope and looking at the vaccination trend is that should be much lower than the
wave. So you're optimistic therefore about the sector. But yes. Mr. Magow, let me ask you this, for aggregators, for companies like MakeMyTrip, how difficult was this entire COVID situation? How precipitous was it in terms of your finances? If people stopped going on flights because flights ceased existing, if people stopped going on holidays because they couldn't travel, what did it mean for MakeMyTrip?
No, you're absolutely right. Couldn't have been actually more difficult, to be honest. Although we have the history of over 2 decades and we had seen down cycles, be it 9/11, be it SARS pandemic, and so on. And, and sometimes, in our sector, the airlines going down, etc., is also a big down cycle, as you know. And so we had some sort of learnings that we've had in the past, and that they definitely came handy. But this was mother of all, in all fairness. So, we did have, when it hit us for the first time, March 20, we were like, from a revenue drop standpoint, we were down by 95%. So we were off the cliff literally, and then we started recovering. So luckily, from our point of view, one, we had the learnings, we had the playbook, some sort of playbook that we had to reapply that, and we also had resources. We had enough on our balance sheet to be able to sort of fall back on. And the first opportunity, we ended up raising more. So we had the ability to raise more cash as well. So I guess that sort of came handy and helped us. But both from, I guess, people perspective, as well as from the business perspective. So it was almost like a double whammy, two-sided attack.
Sure.
From that perspective, it wasn't easy at all.
All right. Well, Mr. Magow, thank you very much for speaking to us. Great to know that the tourism sector is improving. Before I let you go, just one quick question. You gave us some numbers on aviation. Do you have any numbers you can share in terms of hotel occupancy?
Yeah, very much. I mean, hotel, just from the business recovery, I mean, on our platform, I can give you a sense, and, which will be like on some good indication on the overall occupancy as well. Even on the hotel side, our room night recovery on our platform is again on 65-66% of the pre-pandemic level, and that is a good indication of occupancy improving overall as well. But again, largely dominated by two things: one, premium segment of hotels; two, leisure segments, leisure cities and leisure destinations, relatively speaking to the business travel and the business destinations, and also budget hotels, or the relatively lower price hotel segments, which is a function of segments like pilgrimage segment coming back in a big way, student segment coming back in a big way, is lagging behind. But but all the other segments are coming back nicely.
At lower prices?
At lower prices, relatively, for sure, and that's one of the drivers. Because in all fairness, right now, I think everybody is sort of focused on bringing in the cash flow back, bringing the occupancy back, and the yield management sort of takes a back seat. Once you get to the threshold of occupancy levels, then you would end up just focusing on the yield management as well. I think that phase will come, and that might be the phase where, let's say, if everything goes well, fingers crossed, if the same trajectory continues, we might have a good winter. I don't want to speak too soon, but we might have a good winter. And during the peak of the winter, if the occupancy improves, then there will be some sort of correction on the prices as well.
All right, Mr. Magow, great speaking to you, and it's good to hear that things are improving as far as tourism is concerned, closely linked to aviation, but not just aviation. Hotel bookings across a couple of sectors at least are improving. Thanks very much for being with us.